Hi, welcome to NAXSA's podcast number 2. We're very excited. We're going to be talking about trench safety training today, and we have some great experts on that. What is NAXSA? NAXSA stands for the North American Excavation Shoring Association. Its purpose is to promote the safe and efficient use of excavation shoring practices. The organization was created to represent manufacturers, engineers, rental companies and distributors, contractors, as well as universities, association suppliers, and government agencies. All of those representatives who share the common goal of maintaining safety in the excavation shoring industry with the result of 0 deaths and injuries. That is a worthy goal. It's going to take a lot of work. We're excited to begin. Again, this is our second podcast, so we're excited that hopefully this will again contribute to that mission. I mentioned those 2 experts we have on trench safety. First with us is Greg Shreenan from Trench Shoring Company. Greg is the director of training for Trench Shoring University. He's been with the Trench Shoring Company for roughly 20 years as a senior shoring consultant and a trench and excavation safety trainer. He was a master instructor for NUCA for over 15 years before he developed Trench Shoring University to meet the ongoing demands of a trained business that was training as much as 3,000 people a year to be safe around trenches and understand the duties of the competent person. Greg is also the training committee chairman for NAXSA. Greg, how you doing?
Doing great. Great to see you. Great to see you, Joe. It's great to be here.
We're glad you have. We're here. Our second guest is Joe Weiss. He's been with United Rentals for 19 years, and during this time has served in various leadership positions to educate contractors on compliance and protective system solutions for trench excavation and confined space operations. In his current role, he provides strategic oversight to competent person training programs in confined space and excavation safety. So, Joe, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, James. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and with Greg as well. Thank you.
So just doing some math, which I'm terrible at. Joe, how many years have you been doing trench safety training?
Trench safety training, basically, I started in the industry in 2004. So really as a field representative, background in education. So I knew nothing about the industry getting into it, right? And I knew that understanding what compliance would be the only way I could conceivably try to give some ideas of what safety should look like when clients came to look for that support, as I'm sure Greg has had too.
Okay, so almost 20 years in the industry, more than almost. How about you, Greg? How long have you been trench safety training?
Yeah, so training roughly 17 years. I came in from the equipment side. I was in equipment sales, heavy equipment sales before I came to Trench Shoring Company. And like Joe, I wanted to figure out how I could help people, and I like to read. So compliance seemed to be a tough one for a lot of people, and just understanding the things that were written about, the compliance, which would be the standard. It's not an easy document to read. And I just got really interested in it.
I actually had to get my calculator out. I'm that bad with math. So it looks like between our 2 gentlemen, we both have over 36 years of experience in training. So they are experts. I'll start with you, Greg. I know when you teach a competent person class, well, first, how often does somebody need to take trench safety training? And probably what's the most important thing you want an excavation worker to learn when they come to your class?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get that a lot as well. And I tell people when they ask me, what's a good rule of thumb? And I will say, well, some of it depends on how much you're looking at this information and how well acquainted you are with it. If you've been working with it, on and off almost every day or every month, in different projects, and it's been a while since you've been trained, then I would say somewhere between 3 and 5 years. But if you're starting a new project and you haven't touched or looked at these regulations at all in a couple of years, even though your training may be only 2 years old, it may be a good time to come back in because you're going to have to deal with it front and center. And although the standard hasn't changed much, the way it's being enforced and the expectation of the knowledge level that you need to have with respect to understanding and knowing it have changed. There's a much higher expectation. There's much more education around these things these days. So it kind of just, I'll work with somebody and ask them a few questions and kind of try to steer them in the right direction.
Okay. You know, Joe, the regulation is, I mean, it's not entirely complicated, but you know, there is definitely some issues that you need to cover. What would you say is your one takeaway for your students after they're done with the class? What's the one takeaway that they or you want for them to remember, to keep in their mind?
Yeah, James, I tell you, I definitely agree with everything that Greg had said. And when you think about what the big takeaway is, I mean, I guess we could sum it up best by saying helping the individual in that class walk away with the confidence to make safer decisions. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about workers' lives. And, you know, to Greg's point, the standard hadn't changed since the early 90s. But what has is our means and methods of tools and solutions to get things done. So, you know, although, like Greg said, there's really no expiration, if you will, of that wallet card. And I think that's another interesting thing. You know, you go into a competent person class and it doesn't automatically make you that competent person. As Greg was alluding to, there's a process and a continual development of that individual, and they have to have a demonstration of knowledge and experience that employer then would lean into, giving them that greater authority for stop work. But I guess, you know, at the basis of everything we do in the hazards around trenches, it's soils. So if we don't know what they are, how to classify them, how they react to different environmental conditions that can change, whether it be surcharge loads, rain, vibrations, and then what that looks like when you're digging near an adjacent structure or something that could be a surface encumbrance, or Lord knows there's all kinds of utilities underground. So, you know, as you said in the question of how things are maybe somewhat easy on the understanding the standards, it's probably true, but the challenge is how those get applied to every job that's never the same. And I think that's the value of getting that class that's brought to someone and taught by those teams that have experience with the solutions of the manufactured systems.
You know, as a manufacturer, we tend to just always deal with, okay, you're in a type C soil. All right, so let's look at the depth rating on this trench shield for a type C soil. That seems, we're always talking about type A soil, type B. What, Joe, what exactly are we talking about here with this terminology, type A, type B, type C? I mean, what's the practicality of that? Why do we assign those particular letters to the soil as we're determining our trench protection system?
The weight of soil, if it's A, B, or C soil, the weight of that soil and the impact of that load along that trench wall, it's different. And so that gives us the capacity of depth rating of what that shield might be designed for. Some may say that we classify everything as C. And if they understand that what they're really doing, and they may say something like that to a compliance officer, then really there's no valid reason of them being able to potentially use hydraulic shores, right? There could be a valid possibility of a citation there. And that's not what we want to, we want to educate and avoid those kind of conditions and conversations that may happen on a job site. And there's a real reason why soils need to be covered in class.
On that point, Greg, what if you got a contractor who says, look, I'm doing the best practices. I'm utilizing the best practices. So why do I have to go to training, you know, when I am so conscious of trench safety? Why do I need to have that extra step of actually taking the training?
you have to give people their props. They're doing, like you say, the best they can, and so you don't ever want to step on that or get in the way of that. What you want to try to do is to encourage and to aid that, right? So what we do as trainers is we try to understand where somebody's at and then show them how we can enhance or increase their understanding and their knowledge so that there may be things there that they don't understand. And I think one of the things that I see a lot is that people get into opinion-based decision making, and that can really creep up on you and cause problems. We live in a very litigious society, and it's important for everybody to understand liability and how that works. And so much in the same way, when you have an engineer stamp, the reason we have that stamp is because the engineer has said, if you do things this way, then I stand behind this design. As you know, in manufacturing, I stand behind this design, and if you do it this way, you're going to be okay. And so what we're training people to do is to find that in any design that they're doing. You've heard people say, well, if I'm deeper than 20 feet, it has to be engineered. That's a common statement. And while that may be true, everything we do is engineered. I mean, we're not out there just doing things that are just, I hope it's okay, or it looks okay to me. Whether you're sloping at 1.5 to 1 or 1 to 1, or you're benching, or you're using hydraulic shores or a shield, they all have engineering behind that. So I think for me, and I know Joe would say the same, is that we're showing people how to make decisions that are based in the excavation standard. And that may feel a little uncomfortable to some at first when we show them. You go into protective systems and you show them the options that are available, and you show them how that relates to what they're doing.
NAXSA in trench safety specialists, Joe, they're not the only place that some contractors are getting training. There may be a risk management firm or something of this nature. Why would you encourage a contractor to seek out somebody who is a member of NAXSA, who has been doing training for a number of years, rather than just something that they could get that is kind of coming at it from a different angle?
Most of the solutions and the biggest solution that's out there that'll always be probably the most productive, especially to pipeliners, like Greg was saying, are trench boxes. So who's the ones that have had probably the most experience in trying to consult, work with, maybe have engineers that can help see various different applications that have been used with shields, as one example. But there's so many different solutions out there that I think if you're not looking at that provider of training that has that experience with these manufactured solutions, then you're limiting your capacity to be productive. And so what we always strive for, should strive for, is certainly productivity, but safety's got to be that second right there balance of what we're doing. And not to mention things that manufacturers continue to evolve, because the industry is being in a good way positioned and pushed to how can we make it better. But some of the trouble we can get into is, let's say as a contractor, we've seen someone use a box a certain way, or maybe they had a box and they were using a plate to do something with. And look, they may have had site-specific plans that gave them guidelines at certain depths and certain widths to do that and follow that. But the problem is sometimes we see those things and we just get creative on our own, thinking, oh yeah, I can do this. And that's where there's obviously a window of risk that can open up and really affect the potential livelihood and life of that worker that's in that trench. So
yeah, I might even take it a step further and say the contractor might want to seek out a NAXSA member trainer. Why is that important? Well, it kind of hits on what you said in terms of so much of it is engineering, so much of it is specifications of manufacturers and what they're putting into their box and how they're building it. And NAXSA is a collection of all of those entities. And that is going to, show up if you're in trench safety training with a company that is a part of NAXSA. So Greg, what's the ideal setting for a competent person class? And is an online class or a Zoom class, is that a viable option?
Sure, I think it's funny when you said that. What's a viable setting? When I saw that question earlier, I thought of all the warehouse training I've done. I've thought of training, doing confident person training in Connexes, and geez, I've done just about anywhere you could sit people in a chair. I've done a class, but it has more to do with attitude. I'll tell you one of my favorite training places ever is a cold warehouse in a company, and I say cold because it seems like whenever I go there and train, it's freezing. But the owner's always there with the people that I train, and these are manhole builders. And this was a company that didn't even really do a lot of business with us. But to see an owner there and to listen to him talk to his employees about how much he cares about what we're doing, I mean, I would say that's the perfect place, right? Because you have something there that is priceless that you can't really duplicate. Anytime you can get an owner involved in training or a senior management person who is talking from the top of the organization down through people who are in the dirt and stressing to them how much their company cares about them and why this is important, and they sit through the training because they want to be there, they want to understand, that speaks volume. So those are the kind of the best situations for training, that you would have. You want people to be comfortable, you want people to have someplace to go to the bathroom, get something to drink, obviously, but those conditions that I would say are the best ones.
Let's start with final thoughts, and let's throw it to you, Joe. Anything else I haven't asked about that needs to be mentioned?
Well, if I could first, maybe just adding to what Greg said about the conditions for the learning, I definitely agree. It's got to be something that's conducive for the learner to hopefully get something out of the class and apply themselves that knowledge in the field. And at the end of the day, when the owners are there and they've got full support, those are the companies that obviously really get it. Look, we certainly value what that education looks like, certainly from NAXSA as well, and organizations within NAXSA on how that class should be taught. And it's important that hopefully others recognize that, because we're trying to do the right thing and supporting their safety program by being that subject matter expert to teach those classes.
Greg, any additional thoughts either on that or something else?
Yeah, no, I appreciate so much being here again. Just listening to Joe, you know what it makes me think about is why I love NAXSA so much, which is being around guys like you. I mean, from my perspective, as running training, so much, I was training on my own for so many years, and just with nobody to talk to. And now with NAXSA, we're bringing all this knowledge together, and we get all of us in a room, and there's some powerful things that are going to happen here. But I think most of all, if you're a contractor and you're listening to this, get on the NAXSA page and start looking at the information that we're producing. I mean, if you've liked what you've heard here today with Joe and myself, I mean, we have 10, 20 other people like us who are contributing and through engineering, and people like you in manufacturing and training, and taking all of that information and putting it together into some things that you can use, like tips from the trench. And we have another one called Trainer's Table, and then there's videos there on how to install shores and how to do a walk around on trench shield. So we're pulling value together, and we're working together to develop value for you, for the end user. Our goal, as you said, is 0 deaths. There's no way that there should be any fatalities in trenching and excavation work. The whole idea here is to get you to a place where you feel confident that you can go out there, that you can develop practices and procedures that will keep your employees safe, and still be able to be productive, be competitive in your marketplace, and feel like you have a team behind you. Shoring companies are right there every day doing what you're doing and coming up with solutions. And so what we're trying to do here is bring all of this to your doorstep and find better ways to get you the information and the help you need.
Joe, maybe just one more chance. I know you wanted to comment on that previous question. Any last thoughts?
Well, we've definitely hopefully provided some good things to think about when it comes to competent person training. I hope that the takeaway too is that it's not a one and done. I've often heard people come back and looking for, hey, I need my card, or can I get my certification? And look, it's different from an operator equipment training where you may have to have, an exam and you pass with a certain score, and you have to have a certified evaluator to learn how to operate a forklift or an excavator or any kind of dirt equipment. But it's not so much the paper card that you may walk away from a class, but it's really, what are you doing to continually advance your understanding and your knowledge? And everybody has different ways of how they're going to use a protective system or what work they do in the utility business. And so I would just say, don't be afraid to consider other solutions. And so how do you do that? Well, you want to look for providers that might be able to educate and teach on a lot of different solutions, so you have more tools in your toolbox. Again, it's all about safety and productivity.
So where can a company find local trench safety training? Good question. And Greg alluded to it a little bit. Please go to NAXSA.org, NAXSA.org. Under the resource tab, you are going to find a wealth of information, including a search feature where you can click the trench safety training option, put in your location, and you are going to get a NAXSA member company that is near you that provides this critical trench safety training that we're talking about, as well as, if you want to get your crew a hard hat sticker, an Ask NAXSA hard hat sticker that's got a QR code that's going to take them directly to the NAXSA.org resources page. So when they are out in the field and they got a question, they can get to it, answer. It's right on their hard hat, that QR code. Joe Weiss, thank you for joining us. Mr. Shreenan, Greg, thank you for joining us.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
And thank you for joining us on our second NAXSA podcast, NAXSA podcast number 2, until we come up with a different name. Thank you for joining us.